the man who volunteered for hell. Warsaw, September 19, 1940. While most people in Nazi-occupied Poland lived in constant fear of deportation to concentration camps, one man was making plans to get himself arrested. Cavalry Captain Witold Pilecki of the Polish army had conceived a mission so bold, so seemingly impossible, that even his closest allies thought he had lost his mind. His objective: to get himself deliberately captured and sent to Auschwitz concentration camp. At 6 a.m. on that September morning, Pilecki walked calmly into a German street roundup in Warsaw Żoliborz district. He carried false identity papers under the name of Tomasz Serafiński, a simple laborer. When the SS soldiers grabbed him along with nearly 2,000 other Polish civilians, Pilecki didn't resist. He had just become the only person in history to volunteer for what would become synonymous with humanity's darkest hour. The plan. Pilecki's mission was born from desperation and extraordinary courage. The Polish underground had been receiving fragmentary reports about a new German camp near the town of Auschwitz in German. But they knew almost nothing about it. Were prisoners being held there temporarily? How could they be rescued? And what was happening behind those gates? The Polish resistance needed someone on the inside, someone who could organize from within and report back to the outside world. Pilecki, a 39-year-old cavalry officer and landowner, volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. Inside hell. 3 days after his arrest, prisoner number 4859 arrived at Auschwitz. What Pilecki found there exceeded even his darkest expectations. The camp was not just a prison, it was a methodical machine designed to break human beings in body and spirit. Prisoners were dying at a rate of nearly 300 per day from exhaustion, disease, starvation, and outright murder. The SS guards seemed to take pleasure in devising new forms of cruelty. Pilecki watched men beaten to death for the slightest infractions, saw prisoners forced to carry heavy stones at a run until they collapsed and died, witnessed the first experimental gassings in the camp's basement. But instead of breaking, Pilecki began to organize. Building resistance in the shadows. Working with incredible stealth and patience, Pilecki began recruiting fellow prisoners into a secret resistance organization he called the Union of Military Organization, or ZOW. He started with men he had known from the outside, fellow officers, soldiers, intellectuals. Slowly, carefully, the network grew. The organization had multiple purposes. First, to help prisoners survive by sharing food, medicine, and information. Second, to conduct sabotage operations within the camp, damaging German equipment, slowing down work details, helping prisoners escape, and perhaps most importantly, to document what was happening and get that information to the outside world. Pilecki established communication routes that seemed impossible under the circumstances. Messages were smuggled out through released prisoners, through civilian workers who came into the camp, and through laundry that was sent out for washing. His reports, known as the Pilecki Reports, were the first detailed accounts of the Holocaust to reach the outside world. In these reports, sent to Polish resistance headquarters in Warsaw, and from there to the Polish government in exile in London, Pilecki described the systematic murder of Jews, the medical experiments conducted by SS doctors, the daily brutality that claimed hundreds of lives. He provided precise details about the camp's layout, guard rotations, and weaknesses that could be exploited. The impossible escape. By 1943, Pilecki had accomplished much of what he had set out to do. His organization had grown to nearly 1,000 members across the camp. They had conducted dozens of sabotage operations, helped hundreds of prisoners survive, and provided the world with its first comprehensive picture of Nazi genocide. But Pilecki had also become convinced that the camp could not be liberated from within alone. He believed that a coordinated attack from outside, combined with an internal uprising, might be possible. The Polish resistance leadership, however, was skeptical. They had other priorities and limited resource. Frustrated and determined to argue his case in person, made an unprecedented decision. On the night of April the 26th, 1943, he and 2 other prisoners broke out of Auschwitz, something achieved by fewer than 150 people in the camp's entire history. The escape was precisely planned. Pilecki and his companions, Jan Regi and Edward Ciesielski, had been assigned to work outside the main camp perimeter. They pried the door of the bakery they had been assigned to work in, barricaded it from the outside, and made their way through the German lines. For days they traveled cross-country, avoiding patrols, sleeping in forests, helped by sympathetic Polish civilians. After hell. Pilecki's return to the world was bittersweet. He had succeeded in his mission beyond all reasonable expectations, but the information he had provided had not led to the massive rescue operation he had hoped for. The Western Allies, while horrified by his reports, were focused on other strategic priorities. The camps continued to operate. Pilecki rejoined the Polish resistance and continued fighting until the war's end. But his greatest trials were still ahead. When the communist government took control of Poland after the war, he was viewed as a threat, a symbol of the non-communist resistance, a man whose loyalty was to Poland rather than to Moscow. The final price. In 1947, Pilecki was arrested by the communist secret police. He was accused of being a Western spy working against the communist government. The charges were fabricated, but in Stalinist Poland, truth was irrelevant. During his imprisonment, Pilecki was tortured repeatedly. The same man who had endured nearly 3 years in Auschwitz and had voluntarily entered hell itself was broken by his own countrymen's brutality. In letters smuggled out of prison, he wrote that the communist interrogation methods were in some ways worse than what he had experienced under the Nazis. On May 25, 1948, Captain Witold Pilecki was executed by firing squad in Warsaw Mokotów prison. He was 47 years old. His body was thrown into an unmarked grave, its location unknown to this day. Legacy. For decades, the story of Pilecki was suppressed by the communist government. His name could not be mentioned, his reports were classified, and his heroism erased from official history. Only after the fall of communism in 1989, Poland began to rediscover the man who had voluntarily walked into hell. Today, Pilecki is recognized as one of the greatest heroes of World War II. His reports from Auschwitz are preserved in archives around the world, testament to his extraordinary courage and dedication to truth. Schools, streets, and monuments bear his name across Poland and beyond. Cavalry Captain Witold Pilecki reminds us that even in humanity's darkest moments, there are individuals willing to sacrifice everything. Their freedom, their safety, ultimately their lives. Not for personal glory, but for the simple conviction that some things are worth any price. Truth, honor, and the duty to bear witness to evil so that others might be saved. He volunteered for hell so that the world might know what hell looked like. In the end, that knowledge became his most powerful weapon against the darkness.